The smell of bleach was so thick I could taste it on the back of my throat. I wasn't cleaning the floors. I was scrubbing my own fingerprints off the banister because my stepmother said I was contaminating the aesthetic. It sounds like a neat freak's whim until you realize she's not just cleaning the house. She's deleting me. Yesterday, my dog disappeared. This morning, I found my birth certificate in the industrial shredder. And right now, I have exactly 19 minutes before the security guard, Miller, finishes his rounds and finds me hiding in this crawl space with a stolen schedule. If he catches me, I'm not just grounded. I'm being sent to a wellness retreat in the desert that doesn't appear on any map. My own father just signed the paperwork to legally unperson me for a corporate rebranding. I need to know why my face is being scratched out of every family photo with a needle. Let me take you back to the morning the cameras arrived and the scrubbing began. Maya Sterling stacked her AP Calculus textbooks, the heavy spines thudding against the cold marble of the kitchen island. She swiped a stray highlighter from the surface, leaving the stone clinical and vacant. The kitchen smelled of lemon wax and artificial lilies, a scent Evelyn chose specifically to mask the reality of a lived-in home. Maya retrieved her phone, her thumb hovering over the camera icon. Through the lens, the kitchen appeared like a page from a high-end catalog. No crumbs, no half-finished homework, no trace of a daughter. She snapped a photo, the digital shutter sound echoing off the subway tile. Sunlight glinted off the polished chrome of the espresso machine, reflecting a distorted version of Maya's face. A blur of pale skin and messy hair that didn't belong in this pristine frame. She moved to the breakfast nook, snatching a lone hair tie from the table. Every cleared inch felt like a physical erasure. Another flash captured the hollow symmetry of the room. This was her ritual now, documenting the void before Evelyn filled it with curated life. She needed the proof. If she didn't have the digital files, she might start to believe Evelyn's version of reality. That Maya was never there at all. That the house had always been this sterile, this quiet, this empty of her mother's warmth. Her thumb found the smooth river stone in her pocket, rubbing the surface until the friction created a dull heat against her skin. Click, rub, click. The rhythm was the only thing keeping her heart from hammering through her ribs. The front door groaned, followed by the rhythmic, predatory click of Evelyn's heels. The stagers arrive at 10, Maya. Please say the counters are clear. Evelyn called out, her voice tight with the strain of maintaining appearances. She appeared in the doorway, adjusting a pearl earring, her surgical platinum bob catching the light. Her eyes swept the room, dismissive of Maya, but satisfied with the void. Empty as a tomb, Maya murmured, sliding her phone into her pocket. The evidence sat nestled against her thigh, a digital record of the day her stepmother finally scrubbed her out of the floor plan. Evelyn smoothed an invisible wrinkle in her silk blouse, shirt number 14, a Tuesday shirt, though it was only Monday. The schedule was off. That meant the pressure was rising. Good, Evelyn said, her voice a melodic stream that brooked no interruption. First impressions dictate the asking price, and we really do want the light to bounce, don't we? We're moving toward a more streamlined aesthetic for the legacy profile. It's about the brand, Maya, a clean, aspirational brand. Maya didn't answer. She drifted toward the glass doors leading to the gardens, her hand still deep in her pocket, thumb working the stone. The air outside was thick with the scent of damp cedar and the sharp, earthy tang of mulch. She saw Marcus, the gardener, kneeling by a bed of hydrangeas. He didn't look up as she approached, his thick, calloused hands moving with a practiced, nervous energy. He was the only person in this zip code who didn't look at her like she was a smudge on a lens. The wind is picking up from the north, Marcus asked without turning around. It wasn't a question about the weather. It was a signal. He always spoke in questions when the walls had ears. Maya stepped closer, the grass damp against her sneakers. The clouds are moving fast. Why are you clearing the back shed, Marcus? Marcus paused, his fingers hovering over a weed. He looked at the main house, then back at the dirt. The crates by the furnace are for the evening pickup? The ones with the old photo albums and the hand-painted ornaments? A cold shock raced down Maya's spine, sharper than the morning air. She's burning them? My mother's things? The smoke will be thick by sunset? Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. He stood up, wiping his hands on his canvas trousers, refusing to meet her eyes. Maybe the service wing is where the paperwork for the disposal is kept? In the black ledger by the staff entrance? Maya didn't wait for him to finish. She turned and ran, her heart a frantic bird trapped in her chest. She bypassed the main foyer, slipping into the service wing where the air smelled of industrial detergent and scorched dust. She needed to see it for herself. She needed the footage. If Evelyn was destroying the last physical traces of her mother, Maya would make sure the world saw the arsonist at work. She reached the narrow hallway leading to the staff break room. Through a crack in the door, she saw Evelyn standing over a group of hired movers. Evelyn's voice was soft, terrifyingly sweet. Everything in the secondary storage category is to be loaded into the incinerator. We're clearing the clutter. We're brightening the corners. It's a fresh start for the Sterling name. Maya raised her phone, her hands shaking so violently she had to brace her shoulder against the doorframe. She hit record. The screen showed Evelyn pointing a manicured, bone-colored nail at a box labeled Nursery, 2007. It was a hit job, a professional, high-end execution of a memory. Who's there? The voice was a low growl that vibrated in Maya's teeth. She froze. Behind her, the massive shadow of Miller, the security chief, fell across the linoleum. He stood with his arms crossed, his shaved head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He was picking at his cuticles, a small bead of blood blooming on his thumb. I asked a question, Miller said, stepping forward. Maya bolted. She didn't think. She just moved. She scrambled past him, her shoulder clipping his heavy chest. She knew the mansion better than he did. She knew the places where the architects had left gaps, the narrow servant corridors that ran like veins behind the primary walls. She dived into a small wooden door, hidden behind a grand tapestry in the dining room. The air inside the crawl space was stale and smelled of old wallpaper paste. She could hear Miller's heavy boots thudding on the hardwood on the other side of the lath and plaster. Thump, thump, thump. He was a machine, a relentless weight tracking her through the house. Maya pressed her back against a support beam, her breathing shallow. In the dim light, she saw a leather-bound folder resting on a small shelf used by the house staff for keys. She grabbed it. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp. Inside was a printed document titled, The Sterling Family, A New Legacy. Her eyes scanned the text. It was a branding strategy, but the legal language at the bottom made her blood turn to ice. It was a trademark agreement, signed in her father's jagged, authoritative hand. It officially authorized the removal of non-essential likenesses from all public-facing materials. Subverted beat 1.4. Maya's heart slowed, a strange, hollow calm settling over her. This was the proof she'd been looking for. But it was so much worse than a simple forgotten birthday or a missed dinner. She stared at her father's signature. Richard Sterling didn't just overlook her. He had formally, legally, deleted her. The document outlined a standardized family unit consisting of Richard and Evelyn. Maya was listed under legacy liabilities, a line item to be phased out of the public record to ensure the core brand remained uncluttered and aspirational. She felt a surge of cold hope. This was it. If she showed this to him, if she confronted him with the cold, hard evidence of what Evelyn was doing to their history, he would have to wake up. He was a man of logic, a man of bottom lines. Surely he hadn't realized the optimization included the total erasure of his only child. He probably thought it was just corporate paperwork, another merger, another acquisition of image. Once he saw the word liability next to his daughter's name, the temple of the Sterling name would have to crack. He would see Evelyn's rebranding for the psychological warfare it actually was. Maya gripped the folder to her chest, her knuckles white. She waited until Miller's footsteps faded toward the kitchen, then slipped out of the crawl space. She marched toward the grand staircase, her mind racing with the speech she would give. She would be calm. She would be executive. She would speak his language. "Dad," she would say, "the ROI on this family brand is failing because you're liquidating your most valuable assets." He would respect that. He would look up from his desk, straighten his tie, left, right, center, and finally see her. She reached the heavy mahogany doors of his study. She didn't knock. She couldn't afford to lose the momentum of her own courage. She pushed the doors open. The room was a cathedral of dark wood and the smell of expensive scotch and old paper. Richard was sitting behind his desk, 3 computer monitors casting a pale, ghostly blue light over his granite features. He didn't look up. He was mid-call, his headset a thin silver wire against his temple. "The logistics for the July 3rd rollout are finalized," Richard said into the air. "We've optimized the visual assets. The brand is clean, no noise." Maya stepped into the light of the desk lamp. She slammed the folder down onto the blotter. "Is this what I am to you, Dad? A noise? A legacy liability?" Richard's eyes flicked to the folder, then to Maya. There was no shock, no realization, no fatherly concern. He didn't even blink. He touched a button on his console. "I'll have to call you back, Frank. We have a domestic inefficiency." He took off the headset and looked at his watch. "You're interrupting a Tier 1 briefing, Maya. That's a $4 million window you just shattered." "Look at the paper, Dad. You signed it. You signed a document that says I don't exist in the Sterling brand. Evelyn is burning Mom's things in the back, and you're signing trademarks that turn me into a ghost." Richard straightened his tie. Left, right, center. His voice was a flat, dead weight. "The trademark is a necessary legal shield, Maya. It protects the estate from frivolous claims. It's about the bottom line. The optics of a grieving, rebellious teenager don't align with the firm's direction. We need a unified front, a strategy." "A strategy?" Maya's voice cracked. "I'm your daughter, not a visual asset." "You are a part of this house," Richard said, standing up. He seemed to tower over her, a monument of indifference. "And as long as you are, you will follow the protocol. The trademark stands. It's a sunk cost, Maya. Move on. Move on." He stepped around the desk. He didn't hug her. He didn't offer a hand. He placed a palm on her shoulder, not in comfort, but to steer her. He marched her toward the door with the practiced efficiency of a bouncer. "I don't have the bandwidth for this today," he muttered, his eyes already drifting back to the glowing screens. "Go to your room. We'll circle back when the gala is over. Circle back." He shoved her out into the hallway. The heavy mahogany door slammed shut with a sound like a gavel. The lock clicked. Maya stood in the dim corridor, the stolen folder still in her hand, feeling the world tilt on its axis. The hope hadn't just died. It had been liquidated. She wasn't a daughter. She was a line item that didn't balance. The house felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. The lemon wax smell was suffocating. She turned toward the stairs, but a low, mournful sound stopped her. It was a hum, a vibrating funeral dirge that seemed to come from the floorboards. "Buddy?" she whispered. She followed the sound to the mudroom. The dog's bed was gone. His bowls, usually kept in a polished silver tray, were missing. The space was curated. It was empty. The humming grew louder, coming from the back porch. Through the glass, she saw a white van idling in the driveway. Two men in clinical gray uniforms were lifting a crate into the back. "No!" Maya lunged for the door, but a hand clamped onto her arm. Stairs. "He's going to a training camp." Stairs. "He's going to a training camp," Miller said, his voice a dull monotone. The barking was a disruption to the brand. "New rules, kid. You're on house arrest until the 4th. Orders from the missus." He didn't wait for her to protest. He hauled her back toward the grand staircase. Maya fought, kicking at his shins, but he was a mountain of muscle. He dragged her to the 3rd floor, threw her into her bedroom, and turned the key. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, the guest suite bed with its scratchy, high thread count linens that felt like paper. She reached into her pocket and found the stone. She rubbed it so hard her thumb bled. The click-rub-click of her mind, the only thing standing between her and the void. She looked at the door. She wasn't going to wait to be erased. She reached into her nightstand and pulled out a heavy metal nail file, the tip sharp and jagged. She had spent years watching Marcus fix the old locks in the garden shed. A lock was just a puzzle made of pins and springs. It was just a shutter that refused to open. She knelt by the door, the cold metal of the file biting into her palm. She listened for Miller's footsteps, for the hum of the vacuum, for the click of Evelyn's heels. Nothing. The house was a tomb. She inserted the file, feeling for the resistance. Click. 1 pin. Click. 2. Her breath hitched. The 3rd pin was stubborn, like her father. She twisted, the metal groaning. With a sharp snap, the lock gave way. Maya slipped out into the hallway. The mansion was dark now, the shadows long and jagged. She moved like a ghost, avoiding the floorboards she knew would creak. She wasn't going to her room. She was going to the heart of the machine. Evelyn's office was on the 2nd floor, a sanctuary of white silk and glass. Maya reached the door and pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. She pushed it open. The room smelled of ozone and expensive perfume. Maya headed straight for the safe behind the framed Family of the Year portrait. She knew the code. Evelyn used the same numbers for everything. The date she married Richard. A date that marked the beginning of the end. The safe door swung open. Inside weren't just jewels or cash. There were files. Folders upon folders of rebranding case studies. Maya pulled one out. It wasn't about the Sterling family. It was about a woman named Eve Laurent, a talent agent from 10 years ago who had been blacklisted for identity scrubbing. She had helped disgraced politicians and actors disappear by destroying their pasts, their families, their very names. Evelyn wasn't a socialite. She was a professional eraser, and Maya was her latest project. It's rude to look through someone's private history, Maya. The voice was a whip crack in the dark. Maya spun around. Evelyn was standing in the doorway, her white silk shirt glowing in the moonlight. Her hair was perfect, but her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated until they were nothing but black pits. She was holding a heavy glass award, a Philanthropist of the Year trophy, gripped in both hands. "You're a fraud," Maya spat, clutching the birth certificate she'd found in the safe. "You're not a Sterling, you're just a cleaner." Evelyn laughed, a high, melodic sound that ended in a gasp. "I am whatever I need to be to survive. This house was a mess when I found it, cluttered with grief, stained with that woman's memory. I've spent months scrubbing, Maya. Months. And you just keep bringing the dirt back in." Evelyn lunged. She didn't move like a lady. She moved like a cornered animal. She swung the glass award at Maya's head. Maya dived to the floor, the heavy crystal whistling past her ear and smashing into a porcelain vase on the desk. The sound of shattering ceramic was like a gunshot. "You're unstable," Maya screamed, scrambling behind the heavy mahogany desk. "I am curated," Evelyn shrieked, her voice losing its melody. She began to grab things from the desk, staplers, crystal paperweights, and hurl them at Maya. She wasn't aiming, she was clearing. She was in a manic fit of cleaning, trying to smash the clutter that was Maya Sterling. Maya ducked as a heavy brass clock sailed over her head, thudding into the wall. She reached into the bottom drawer of the desk, looking for a weapon, but her hand closed on a thick, leather-bound dossier. She pulled it out. It was a list of names. And next to each name was a price and a method of disposal. Maya's eyes widened. She wasn't just being erased from the brand. She was being prepared for a sanctuary transfer. The door to the office burst open. Miller stood there, his face a mask of professional indifference, though his thumbs were raw and bleeding. "The noise is a violation of the evening protocol," Miller said. Evelyn stopped, her chest heaving, the glass award still gripped in her hand. She smoothed her hair, her face snapping back into a mask of calm in an instant. "Maya was just having an episode, Miller. The stress of the gala. Please take her back to her room. We need the house quiet for the morning stagers." Maya didn't wait for Miller to move. She saw the open vent near the floor, a relic of the old gravity-fed heating system. She scrambled into it, the metal duct cold and narrow. "Get her!" Evelyn screamed. Maya pushed herself through the dark, the smell of dust and old iron filling her lungs. She could hear Miller's heavy hands banging against the vent cover behind her. She crawled, her knees scraping against the rivets, until she reached a vertical shaft. She slid down, the air rushing past her, until she hit a grate. She kicked it open and tumbled out into the foyer. The house was transformed. It was the night of the gala. The air was filled with the scent of lilies and expensive catering. Men in tuxedos and women in silk gowns were drifting through the halls, sipping champagne. The music, a soft string quartet, vibrated through the floor. Maya stood in the shadows of the grand staircase, her clothes covered in dust, her face streaked with soot. She looked like a ghost at a feast. She saw her father standing by the fireplace, laughing with the mayor. He looked perfect. He looked like the man on the Legacy magazine cover. She tried to move toward him, but a hand caught her shoulder. She flinched, but it wasn't Miller. It was Marcus. He was wearing a waiter's jacket that was 2 sizes too big, his calloused hands hidden in white gloves. "The master key is in the pocket of the red coat in the cloakroom?" Marcus whispered, his eyes darting toward the security guards at the door. "The service entrance is the only way to the gallery without being seen." He slipped a small, cold piece of metal into her hand. "Thank you," Maya whispered. "The truth is a heavy burden to carry?" Marcus asked, then turned away to offer a tray of hors d'oeuvres to a passing socialite. Maya slipped into the cloakroom, found the key, and made her way to the back of the house. She entered the gallery through the service door. The room was dominated by a massive object covered in a heavy velvet shroud. The centerpiece, the new Sterling family portrait. She hid behind the velvet curtain of the easel, her heart hammering. She could hear Evelyn's voice on the other side, addressing the crowd. "We wanted to capture the essence of the modern family," Evelyn said, her voice a perfect melodic stream. "No clutter, no baggage, just the pure, streamlined future of the Sterling name." Maya reached out, her fingers brushing the velvet. She wanted to see it. She wanted to see how they had painted her. Maybe, just maybe, her father had insisted on a small corner for her. Maybe she was there, in the background, a part of the temple after all. She shifted her weight, trying to get a better view through the gap in the curtain. But the easel was top-heavy. As she moved, the velvet shroud began to slide. "And now," Evelyn announced, "the reveal." The shroud fell. The crowd gasped. Maya stood frozen, exposed in the bright gallery lights, standing right next to the canvas. The painting was a masterpiece of cold, clinical realism. It showed Richard and Evelyn standing in the center of the pristine kitchen, bathed in a golden, artificial light. They looked like gods. And there, in the corner of the frame, was a smudge. A dark, grotesque deformity on the window pane behind them. It wasn't a girl. It was a blur of brown and gray, a literal piece of dirt that the artist had rendered with painstaking detail. It was Maya. Richard stepped forward, his face turning a deep, bruised purple. He didn't look at the painting. He looked at Maya. He seized her arm, his grip so tight she felt the bone groan. "You've ruined it," he hissed, his voice a low, terrifying vibration. "You've ruined the reveal." "Look at it, Dad," Maya cried, pointing at the canvas. "That's what you think of me. A smudge on the window." Richard leaned in, his breath smelling of scotch and mint. "It's better this way, Maya. You were always so difficult to look at. You're a distraction, an inefficiency." He didn't lead her away. He dragged her. He pulled her through the crowd of horrified socialites, down the stairs, and into the basement. Subverted beat 3.5. The basement was a cavern of concrete and shadows, smelling of damp earth and the sharp, acidic tang of her darkroom chemicals. Richard threw her into the center of the room. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice echoing off the cold walls. "The transport arrives at midnight. You're going to a facility in the desert, Maya, a place where you can be curated properly, where you won't be a liability to this family anymore." "You can't do this," Maya screamed, rushing for the door. Richard was faster. He slammed the heavy steel door shut. The sound was a final, absolute thud that vibrated in Maya's teeth. The lock turned, a heavy, industrial bolt that she couldn't pick with a nail file. Maya collapsed against the door. She felt a surge of cold, sharp clarity. This was the logical conclusion. She had tried to be smart. She had tried to use their language, their documents, their bottom lines. She had believed that if she played by their rules, she could win. But the rules were rigged. Her father hadn't been tricked by Evelyn. He was her partner. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a brand. And a brand didn't have room for a girl who remembered the smell of her mother's perfume or the sound of a dog's bark. She looked around the dark room. The red safety light cast a bloody glow over the trays of developer and fixative. She saw her camera sitting on the workbench, the lens capped, the strap hanging like a noose. She wasn't a ghost yet. She stood up, her legs shaking, but her mind clear. She walked to the workbench. She didn't grab her camera. She grabbed the silver cake knife she'd swiped from the gala buffet earlier. It was heavy, the edge sharpened for cutting through layers of sugar and cream. She looked at the small, high window leading to the garden. It was narrow, but she was thin. A legacy liability didn't take up much space. She piled the crates of her mother's remaining things under the window. She climbed up, the wood creaking under her feet. She used the knife to pry the frame open. The cool night air rushed in, smelling of rain and cedar. She squeezed through, the rough concrete scraping her skin, and tumbled onto the wet grass. The gala was still in full swing. She could hear the muffled sound of the string quartet and the high, artificial laughter of the guests. She ran toward the back entrance of the gallery. She didn't hide this time. She walked through the service door and straight to the portrait. The crowd was gathered around the buffet in the next room. The gallery was empty for a single, flickering moment. Maya raised the cake knife. She didn't hesitate. She plunged the blade into the canvas, right where the smudge was. She dragged the knife down, the sound of the fabric tearing like a physical scream. She cut a jagged, gaping hole in the center of the perfect sterling family. She didn't stop there. She sliced through Evelyn's silk blouse, through Richard's granite jawline. She cropped the image until it was nothing but ribbons of ruined paint. Maya. Evelyn was standing in the doorway, her face pale, her hands trembling. It's much more manageable when it's curated, isn't it? Maya said, her voice steady and cold. She turned and ran toward the main hallway. She reached the fire alarm pull station. She didn't think about the cost. She didn't think about the visual assets. She pulled the lever. The sirens erupted, a high-pitched mourning shriek that made the skin crawl. A moment later, the industrial sprinklers hissed to life. Cold, chemically treated water rained down on the velvet furniture, the silk gowns, the legacy magazine proofs. The air smelled of wet wool and panic. In the chaos, Maya ran to Evelyn's office. The door was open. She headed for the safe. She didn't look for money. She looked for the secondary storage files. She found a small wooden box tucked in the back. She opened it. Inside were hundreds of Polaroids. Photos of Maya as a baby. Photos of her mother. But every single one had been mutilated. Her face had been scratched out with a needle, leaving nothing but a white, jagged void where her features should be. This wasn't a rebranding. It was a premeditated psychological hit. Evelyn had been erasing her for years, one photo at a time. Maya tucked the box under her arm. She walked out of the office and down the grand staircase. The guests were fleeing, their expensive shoes splashing in the rising water. She saw her father standing in the foyer, the water ruining his tuxedo, his face a mask of pure, impotent fury. "You've destroyed everything." Richard screamed over the sirens. The house, the brand, the temple. Maya stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the cowardice behind the granite jaw. He was a man who lived in a house of right turns because he was terrified of the chaos of a left. He was a man who would rather have a smudge on a window than a daughter with a heartbeat. "The temple was already empty, Dad," Maya said. She didn't wait for a response. She walked out the front door and into the rain. Marcus was waiting by the gate in his old, beat-up truck. The engine was idling, a plume of white exhaust rising into the cold night air. "The keys are in the ignition?" Marcus asked, stepping out of the driver's seat. "The map to Oregon is in the glove box." Maya climbed in. She looked at the house one last time. The lights were flickering, the perfect Sterling family dissolving in the rain. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. "The road is long, but the border is near?" Marcus whispered. then disappeared into the shadows of the trees. Maya put the truck in gear. She drove toward the highway, her hands steady on the wheel. As she reached the bridge at the state line, she pulled over. The wind whistled through the suspension cables, a high-pitched shriek that sounded like a song. Below, the river churned, a dark, unstoppable force. Maya took her phone out of her pocket, the device that held the evidence, the liabilities, the brand. She looked at the screen, then tossed it into the water. She watched it sink, a tiny spark of light swallowed by the dark. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out the river stone. Her thumb found the worn, smooth surface. She looked at it for a long moment, then let it fall into the grass. She didn't need the stone to remember her mother. She didn't need the photos to know she existed. She got back in the truck and crossed the border. The sun was beginning to rise over the Douglas firs, casting a soft, honest light over the road ahead. Maya looked in the rearview mirror and smiled. The frame was finally broken, and for the first time in her life, the image was perfectly in focus.